census. Why is that?
Well, number one, the Constitution requires that every 10 years the Americans are enumerated. In other words, everyone is counted. There's a good reason for that. It's because we need to know how many people live in each state so we can divide them up according to congressional district and assign representation. And also a certain amount of federal funds go back to the states depending upon who lives in the states. The thing is that census has expanded enormously to ask questions that are of a very personal, invasive nature. We have a short form census that is completed once every 10 years, but every year there's a long form census. And the long form census now is 28 pages long with multiple questions, and it isn't just for one member of the family, it's every member of the family. They're so invasive, they even ask what time, hour, and minute you leave for work in the morning, when you come back, how many bathrooms are in your home, what kind of fuel you use in your home, and then they ask questions just of personal nature. For instance, what about your emotional state, your mental state? And I just think that the American people, if they want to answer those questions, it should be voluntary. Right now, the federal government actually has the ability to fine Americans if they decide they don't want to answer those questions. So think of this. If an individual is wealthy enough, they can pay the fine and keep their privacy. But if you're not wealthy, what's your choice? You either don't answer the questions and subject yourself to a fine, or you answer them. Now here's my concerns. Number one, the federal government, in my opinion, is overreaching. They're asking questions that they have no business asking the questions for. I don't believe any American should be under compulsion to feel that they need to answer those questions, number one. Number two, I'm concerned about the privacy component. We can answer the questions, but we just saw in the last 2 weeks, hackers hacked into the Pentagon, into Homeland Security's computer systems. We know that some of the most sensitive data is capable of being hacked into. What sense of privacy will Americans really have over their data being held private? And then number three, finally, I'm very concerned, one of the national partners that was named to help with the census is ACORN. ACORN is an organization that's been found, that has been indicted in over 12 states just this year for voter fraud. They have a long history of voter fraud. And the Census Bureau, in essence, is putting its own credibility on the line by aligning with a national partner like ACORN. This is reprehensible, and so I'm very concerned on those levels.
Are you concerned with the possible legal actions that come from not completing the census?
Sure, that's a very real issue, and I certainly don't, I'm not telling any other American that they should not fill out the census. I have never done that, told other Americans what they should or shouldn't do. That is up to their conscience. But for myself and for my family, our comfort level is such that we are happy to tell the United States government how many people in our home, who we are, and our contact information, and that's where we're drawing the line.
Okay, according to the Census Bureau website, partners of the census are described as government, nonprofit, corporate, or community organizations that have formally pledged their commitment to share the 2010 census message and mobilize their constituents in support of the Census Bureau's goal of achieving a complete count. So if they aren't actually gathering information, what is wrong with having ACORN partnering on the 2010 census?
Well, one thing that we have been told is that ACORN will be encouraging their own membership and their employees to go and apply and become an enumerator. So even though the organization ACORN as an organization may not be conducting the census, it appears that perhaps their employees and members will be encouraged to get jobs as enumerators, and that's very concerning.
What type of fraud do you think can occur?
Well, one thing that I think the American people need to know is safe is the collection of their data. Will their data truly stay safe? For instance, if a person has an unlisted phone number, will people who collect that phone number make sure that only the government gets that and that they don't retain a copy of that information? We asked the Census Bureau to come into my office and answer questions that we had about the census. One thing they told us, if an individual chooses not to answer the census questions, the Census Bureau said they will make 6 contacts with that American. They'll either telephone them or they'll make personal visits at their door. This last weekend, I was in my home district, in the heart of the district. A woman came up to me and said, Michelle, I can't tell you what it's like to be under the harassment of the Census Bureau. We had people knocking at our doors. They were very rude. They were demanding and insistent that we fill out this data. We were uncomfortable filling this out. And this woman on her own came up to me and told me this story. She said, I agree with you. I am very concerned about the level of harassment that I received in filling out my data. But here's the kicker. The Census Bureau told my office that if they still didn't receive the information after trying an American 6 times, then they would go to the neighbor that lives to the right of the person and to the left of the person. And the Census Bureau would ask their neighbors to fill out this data. Now this should give all of us pause. If the federal government is asking our neighbors to fill out private sensitive information and they're guessing on that information, it just seems to me at some point the American people have the right to draw the line and say, I'm not comfortable. I don't think I should have to do everything the federal government is asking me to do. And if Americans feel that way, again, there is basic information that the federal government needs and has the right to know. No one quarrels with that. That's entirely reasonable. But when it crosses the line into personal, sensitive information, I think those questions should be voluntary and not mandatory. Certainly the American people shouldn't be subject to a fine.
Do you think that the Census Bureau will heed your call to drop ACORN from the partnership program?
I think it would do well for the Census Bureau to drop ACORN from being a national partner because ACORN has such a poor reputation. ACORN drags down the reputation of the United States Census Bureau. My quarrel is not with the United States Census Bureau. They're conducting their work, and it is Congress's duty to have oversight over the Census Bureau. That's why I've introduced a legislation together with my colleague, Congressman Ted Poe of Texas, to recommend that the census be voluntary beyond the basic reasonable information that government needs. All other questions should be voluntary. That's not the Census Bureau's fault. That's Congress's obligation. So we need to have oversight and let the Census Bureau what the true questions should be.
And is there a way that we can ensure an honest and accurate census next year?
I believe that there is. Another one of my colleagues is Jason Chaffetz from Utah, and his bill says that perhaps our partner should be the post office. The post office is already delivering mail, visiting every home, and perhaps that might be a better use of resources to invite the Census Bureau to help out. After all, about 60% of all Americans voluntarily complete the entire census and send it in. And so it's the 40% who don't fill that out that we want to gain that information from. And again, it may be that we have 40% of Americans who don't fill that information out because they feel very concerned about their privacy interests. If you look in the healthcare field, we have HIPAA legislation. And HIPAA makes sure that all Americans enjoy a high degree of privacy with their healthcare information. And again, I encourage people to go to my website, bachmann.house.gov, B-A-C-H-M-A-N-N, bachmann.house.gov, because there I've posted the long form and the short form census. And I invite all Americans, read the census for yourself, and then consider these questions. Is the federal government overreaching? Will my privacy rights be protected? And will a national partner such as ACORN be a good choice regarding the census? Ask yourself those questions and then ask yourself, should the federal government be fining Americans for failing to fill out all of this information when they have questions? And perhaps should some of these questions be considered voluntary?